Hey guys, today I'm going to do a very in-depth shootout between two really good amplifiers, the Driftwood Purple Nightmare and the Mesa Boogie Badlander. Now these amplifiers are both 100 watts. In this shootout I'll be using my Mesa 212 cab with vintage 30s, and the mics that I'm using are the Royer 121 and the Shure SM57 paired together. And there is no pre or post processing done on the guitar tracks at all, whether it's in a mix or isolated. Either way is 100% raw and unfiltered and unprocessed. Okay, I'll be shooting these amplifiers out in these categories and not necessarily in this order. Number 1, the clean channels. Number 2, with and without an overdrive pedal. Number 3, double tracked in a full mix. Number 4, I'm going to put them up against each other with the same riff, and I will judge how they sound mic'd through my in-ears and in the room. I'll also be playing some solos on both amplifiers with no effects so that you can hear the raw tone when it comes to playing leads. And after we're all done, I'm going to give you my final thoughts regarding how these amplifiers compared when put up against each other in all of these different categories. So let's get started with comparing them in a full mix. Now let's take the double track recording of the amplifiers and see how they compare isolated. Alright, so now I'm going to play the same riff on both amplifiers and see how they compare. The overdrive pedal is on, and the Purple Nightmare is in high gain mode, and the Badlander is in crush mode. And they will stay in those modes throughout the rest of this shootout, unless we're doing the clean channels, of course. Here we go. So what I experienced listening to both amplifiers through my in-ears is, although the Badlander still sounded really good, I just feel like it sounded a little smaller. There were less frequencies, and it seemed like it's been really sculpted, and a lot of the extra kind of frequencies are taken out. But I think that when I compare it to the Purple Nightmare, it's almost like they took out maybe a little too much out of the amplifier. Again, still sounds really good. It's very, very, very refined, where with the Purple Nightmare, you're getting more frequencies, you're getting a bigger sound, more texture. You're actually getting a lot more texture with this amplifier. It's pretty grainy and aggressive, and the aggression level on the Purple Nightmare is noticeably more than the aggression level on the Badlander. It definitely has more gain as well, but I'm not talking about gain. Even though it does have more, it has more aggression than the Badlander. And I really love that gritty top end that the sizzle switch gives you on the Purple Nightmare. It's the perfect amount of top end, and the frequencies that Marek chose to push with that switch are perfect. It really couldn't have been a better choice as far as the frequencies go, and the level of frequencies that he's pushing. It pushes them just right, just to cut through the mix, but without annoying your ears at all. I mean, the Purple Nightmare definitely has it on size of sound, texture, aggression, the amount of gain, and the overall frequencies that it's pushing. It definitely has a bigger voice regarding this part of the shootout. So now let's see how they both compare when I turn the overdrive pedal off with the same riff. We'll start with the Purple Nightmare. Now let's switch to the Badlander. So between the two, without the overdrive pedal, the Badlander at first seems like it's tighter, but it's kind of like deceptively tighter. Let me explain. It's a little thinner. So because of that, it tricks you into thinking like, oh, it's tighter because there's not as much low end. But when you go back and forth between them a couple times, you realize that the Purple Nightmare is pretty much just as tight as the Badlander, but it just has a bigger sound, a little more low end, but it's good low end. It's like the proper low end. It's not that gooey, muddy low end. It's just got a really nice kind of thud to it without the overdrive pedal. So I would have to say that I would give them an even score regarding tightness here. And I always push an amplifier with an overdrive pedal, so having something with a little more low end in it to sculpt and have room for sculpting actually is a benefit for me, especially when it's not gooey, flubby low end. It's actually very appropriate low end, like I said earlier, on the Purple Nightmare. And when you hit it with a pedal, it absolutely loves being hit with a pedal. And the thing is Merrick, the guy who built the amplifier, actually put an overdrive pedal in it, so you know he designed it so that it would take a pedal well. So that's actually a really good plus for this amplifier. Again, I would score them evenly regarding how tight they are without the pedal, while preferring the Purple Nightmare slightly over the Badlander without the pedal, because it's just as tight, but it has a little more of that thud that I like. Now let's see how they compare when I play leads on them. There will be no effects at all, just an overdrive pedal. We're going to start with the Purple Nightmare. So what I noticed was the notes on the Purple Nightmare were a little more aggressive and a little bigger sounding. But the differences between these two amplifiers when you're playing leads on them are quite a bit smaller than when you're playing rhythms on them. I mean, I notice a much bigger difference between these amplifiers when I'm playing rhythms than when I'm playing leads. Okay, so now let's move on to the clean channels. Wow, there's a huge difference between these channels. The Purple Nightmare was really big and warm and full, where the Badlander was a lot smaller. I mean, it was chimey, but it had this very small kind of presence about it. It wasn't a lot of warmth there. It was a little on the cold side. It still sounded good, but when you compare it to the Purple Nightmare's clean channel, it just kind of paled in comparison, to be honest with you. It just sounded kind of small and sharp and a little like overly bright. And you could see with the settings on the Badlander, I don't have anything pushed beyond what would be considered normal. I even brought the presence down on the clean channel of the Badlander so I could taper off some of that high end, and it still is a little overly bright for my taste. Maybe it's just the fact that it's not warm enough to kind of fill in and distract me from a lot of that brightness. Because with the Purple Nightmare, it still has plenty of great brightness on it, but it still just sounded really warm. And a lot of times, it's not about how bright or dark an amplifier is, it's about how balanced it is. So I would definitely have to give the Purple Nightmare a huge win when it comes to the clean channel, because it's warm, it's bright, it's chimey, it's full, it's resonant, it has great sustain, and it just has all the characteristics that at least I look for in an amplifier regarding a clean channel. Again, the Badlander clean channel is good, but when you compare it to the Purple Nightmare, it just lacks warmth and it might just have too much top end. And again, maybe some warmth would fix that and balance it out a bit, but I'm not sure. Okay, so now I'm going to take these in-ears out and tell you what I'm experiencing in the room when I listen to both the clean channels on these amplifiers and the high gain channels. Let's start with the clean channels. Alright, so in the room, what I noticed right away when I started playing the Purple Nightmare was how big it sounded. There was so much resonance coming out of this cab, and it just sounded really full. There was lots of great low end, and it was super warm, but it still had that really nice chimey top end, so that all the notes that I played stuck out perfectly, and it had, again, this really nice chimey character to it. And it was bright and sunny and warm and full, and it had tons of big resonance. I mean, it had some authority. And as soon as I switched over to the Badlander, what I noticed is how small everything got. And there's definitely something happening with the top end there that's a little bit you know, annoying to my ears, especially when you compare it to the Purple Nightmare. It's not an awful clean channel. It actually sounds pretty good, but when you put it up against something that sounds better, it's hard not to notice the difference and to also notice what something lacks or maybe needs improvement. So now let's hear how the high gain channels compare in the room, starting with the Purple Nightmare. So here's what I noticed in the room while playing both of these amplifiers. Both sounded very good, but I will have to say that the Purple Nightmare had a much more authoritative sound. It just sounded bigger, and it just had a lot more aggression to fill the room. It just filled the room up with more frequencies and more sound. The size of sound I was experiencing while playing the Purple Nightmare in the room was absolutely enormous. I mean, it just had so much texture, character, aggression, punch, resonance, low end, great mids, great top end. It just had this really nice, very well balanced across the whole spectrum of frequencies sound, Where the Badlander, it sounded good, but it just had a smaller, less authoritative sound, less aggression, less texture. I know that Mesa did a lot of sculpting to the Badlander when they made it. They wanted to take the dual rectifier amplifier and pull all of the stuff out of it that was no longer necessary, like too much low end, too fizzy, and they condensed it down to what they considered were the appropriate amount and types of frequencies. I think they did a really good job with it, but I think in some instances, especially when you compare it to the Purple Nightmare, and depending on your taste and what you want, they might have taken a little too much out of the Badlander. I still love it, and I still think it's a great amplifier, but in this shootout, I definitely have to give the Purple Nightmare a resounding victory under all the categories. In the mix, in the room, through the mics and the in-ears, the clean channel, the high gain channels, and how it takes a pedal. It doesn't thin it out too much. The pedal doesn't thin out the Badlander too much either, but I just think that because of how big and boomy the Purple Nightmare is, and I mean boomy in a good way, it's not flubby, it just has this really huge low end. And because of that, when you hit it with a pedal, none of that goes away. It just gets more responsive while still giving you that really nice earth-shattering kaboom, you know, so it's really nice to have. But here's an interesting fact for you. When I talked to Merrick, who actually built the Purple Nightmare, when I talked to him on the phone today, I asked him which amplifier was kind of his muse for this amp. And oddly enough, it was a 2006 dual rectifier by Mesa Boogie. So basically what he said was he really liked that amplifier, and he still enjoys the sound of Mesa Boogie amps. It's just he wanted it to sound a little more sculpted for what he liked for his ears. So he basically started from scratch and created his own amplifier, again using the dual rectifier as his muse, and he wanted something that had a better top end and a little less loose on the bottom end. And he thought by putting a overdrive pedal in the amplifier, it would keep him from tap dancing on the pedal board all the time when he's switching channels. Because on this amplifier, you can assign which channel you want the overdrive to engage with. So if you want it to not engage when you're on the clean channel, you can program the amp to do that very easily. So now you don't have to tap dance as much. So interestingly enough, Merrick and the guys at Mesa had the same idea as far as what they wanted to do with the dual rectifier amplifiers. They wanted to sculpt them and hone them and take out all of the stuff that was not necessary and revoice them and make them sound more modern, and wanted them to feel a little more responsive when you're playing them. And they both had, it's kind of like the telephone game, right? I mean, they both had their own version of the story, and I personally enjoy both versions of the story, but I would have to say I would definitely lean more towards Merrick's side of the story with the Purple Nightmare, because it has all of these amazing frequencies that it pushes out without being too much. It's just this really very well balanced sound that's coming out of this amplifier. Tons and tons of aggression. It has more gain. I only have the gain at 1 o'clock on the amplifier. On the Mesa, I have it cranked all the way up on the crush channel. So what does that tell you? It has more gain, more aggression, better low end, fuller sound. It pushes all of the right frequencies the way I like them anyways, and it just sounds and feels amazing. The Badlander definitely had a good standing in this shootout, but I definitely have to give the win, as far as my opinion is concerned, to the Purple Nightmare. What a great job Merrick did on this amplifier. It is phenomenal, and it definitely lives up to every bit of the hype that we hear about it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. This was actually a lot of fun comparing these two amplifiers. I really learned a lot today, and I hope you did too. And to all my subscribers, thank you so much for all your support, and I really appreciate you very much. And if you haven't subscribed, please do, and click the bell so that you can get notified every time I either go live or come out with a new episode. Well, I got a lot of great stuff coming up, and I'll see you on the next one.